Morning. Okay, I think we are ready to begin. Chair Sabatier, as long as Matthew, you can hear us?
I can hear you well, yes. And we are waiting on just one other person to join the group of panelists.
Okay. We'll only have the access to the one camera for today. So we are ready when you are. So Chair Sabatier, whenever you're ready to start, we are ready here. And apologize for the technical delay.
Check, check.
Here, look. Well, it's little, so you can't see stuff.
Everything is good to go?
Testing. Johanna, are you good to go? Johanna, are you
Yes, I'm good to go.
Thank you.
We're like Mississippi.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get this meeting started. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties. Today is Saturday, October 2nd, 2021. It is 10:05 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors for Lake County. And let's go ahead and open this meeting up. Do we have a moment of silence? All right, let me check the Zoom room as well. And so let's go ahead and I know that may have done this before, but it's okay to repeat. I know that it's been a struggle for some specific sectors of our communities, whether you are an educator, whether you are involved in healthcare. I think that some of the struggles have been absolutely exacerbated by some of the circumstances due to COVID, due to staffing shortages, and so on, which are all interconnected. And so if we could hold a moment of silence for all of those that are trying their best and hardest to provide the services of education and healthcare to our community, I would appreciate it. Supervisor Scott, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance
to the
of the United States
United States
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to our item for our special meeting, 4.1, Redistricting Public Hearing Number 2, Communities of Interest. CAO Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our consultant, Margaret Long, is going to facilitate the presentation today. This is the second of our redistricting public hearings. So welcome, Margaret.
Good morning. I'm happy to jump in unless Matthew has some beginning words he'd like to share. Nope. Okay, I'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second of 4 hearings, public hearings on the redistricting process. This one is specifically focused on what we call communities of interest. And so we're going to do a brief PowerPoint just to get through the concepts of it and then open it up for discussion about whether the board or the public has any communities of interest you'd like us to specifically look at throughout the process of redistricting. I will share my screen if I'm able to. I am. So again, we're just going to recap. We'll do this at every hearing because the law that we are following, the state and federal law regarding redistricting, requires us to kind of present again. So I apologize that this is a recap for everyone involved, but anyone who's joining new needs to understand the concept of redistricting, which every 10 years in U.S. Census data, we have to redraw our boundary lines to look at what supervisory districts look like. It requires us to review all of the census data that is obtained from the federal government, The state does look at it as well, the state of California, and does make tweaks to it. Specifically this year, they're making tweaks on it based on prison population, looking at their districts versus what we had last time. So we are still waiting for all that data to become finalized and come out. Once we obtain that data, we look at it and draw our lines, putting a bunch of different factors into consideration. We look at geography, topography, and we also look at what's called communities of interest. And again, that's the focus of today's hearing. The concept behind this redistricting is, again, the Board of Supervisors is what's ultimately going to draw the lines, but it requires public input in order to do that. So these hearings we hold, these 4 hearings we hold, are to obtain that public input. It is not the only way the public can participate in this process. We do have an email address set up, which is redistricting@lakecountycalifornia.ca.gov. And that's an opportunity if folks don't want to appear at these hearings and publicly present, they can provide information to us through that means. Every piece of information we receive, every public comment we receive will be analyzed as part of this process. So again, it's encouraged that anyone who wants to have a say in what their lines look like participate through this process. When we are withdrawing it, the AB 849 has created kind of a checklist of what we look at, and also in an order that we look at them. First of all, again, it's required that we keep our areas geographically contiguous, meaning we can't have islands. One supervisorial district can't have one space here and then another space that's not connected. We look at the integrity of keeping local neighborhoods and communities together, again, to minimize divisions in those types of situations. We also look at the geography, again, mountain ranges or rivers or other types of natural flows, again, natural barriers. We also look at non-natural barriers, so streets, high lines, other man-made barriers, and try to keep those together. And again, we try to make the areas as compact as possible. They don't like to see fingers, they don't like to see long lines, long stretches, they like to be as compact as possible. But the one thing we don't look at is we don't draw the lines for the purpose of discriminating against political parties. And that's a question that comes up a lot. Can we keep all the supervisors in their current district? And the answer is I don't know, because we don't look at that. We look at the other 5 factors. We don't look at keeping political parties together. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn. She's works in my firm, and she's our expert on community of interest. She's going to walk you through how we define communities of interest. And we, as part of this presentation, did look at your 2010 data to look at what, at that time, you considered to be communities of interest. It wasn't considered or required to be considered back then in the same manner it is required to be considered now. But we do have that information as well. So I'll turn it over to Carolyn for the next few slides.
Thank you, Margaret. So what is a community of interest? The California Constitution defines a community of interest as a community of interest is a contiguous population which shares common social and economical interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effectiveness of representation. And so it includes a couple of examples in the Constitution. Those can be urban areas, rural areas, agricultural areas, certain types of transportation access, work opportunities. It's actually pretty large or broad type of definition, and I'm going to go a little bit more into what that looks like in Lake County. If you can switch the slide for me, Margaret. So here's some more examples so that we can really start having input from our community about what it looks like and what our communities of interest are in Lake County, and not just the cities, but also in throughout the county. So the first one is geographic. So what rural interests or urban interests do people share that reside in Lake County in several of the cities? Housing patterns, living conditions, cultural, religious affiliations, different language characteristics, types of schools, attendance areas of schools, colleges is another good community of interest example. Congressional and state legislative districts, which we'll get into a little bit later. but also socioeconomic issues, income levels, educational backgrounds, household and family size, whether or not there's a large group of renters versus housing owners, and then also policy issues. So we're looking at employment economic patterns. How is a majority of a community employed? And what is the economic base for that community? So there's a lot of different things that we can look at to think about communities of interest. And as I said, we have a couple of examples from actually Lake County that we would like the public and the board to think about and consider. And so here's another example that I pulled from Sacramento. So Little Saigon is a community of interest in the Sacramento area. And it is, if you can go to the next slide, I have a map that is a more visual representation of this community of interest. There you go. So you can see the neighborhoods in Sacramento. This is a neighborhood in Sacramento, and it shows the streets. But it also, if you look at that red line, that is what the community considers Little Saigon. And so this is a group of residents, really a neighborhood, where they have Vietnamese shops, where a lot of residents have Vietnamese cultural backgrounds and ancestry. And so they have really formed this community, and they've called themselves, or called it, Little Saigon. So they have created this community of interest and established it as a community of interest for their redistricting purposes. So this is a good example of what we could look at in Lake County as a community of interest. If these things come to mind about your neighborhood or about neighborhoods around you, we would love to hear from you and get more information and details about what you look at as your neighborhood and what binds you together in your community. So what are the communities of interest in Lake County? And this is really where we want to hear from the actual residents of Lake County, the community. You know, what rural or industrial or agricultural communities are created or have been established in the last 10 years? What do they look like for Lake County? And we don't, like Margaret said earlier, we don't want to think about political parties or certain specific political issues as a way or a binding community interest, but we do want to see what, if anything, if there's similarities in how somebody, you know, gets to work, for instance, or working in an agricultural setting. That can create a community of interest. If we continue to the next slide, we have a couple of local examples that we obtained from staff over the years since the last redistricting in 2010. And so these are some areas that we can start thinking about as possible communities of interest that we might want to keep together or make sure that they're all in one district. The Rancherias, Buckingham, the Three Rivieras. For instance, also certain apartment complexes with similar characteristics, like low-income apartment complexes or housing units or senior housing. We want to make sure that those can stay all in one district as they may have created a community of interest. So this is really the biggest question for the public. What should we consider in our 2020 redistricting as communities of interest? The things we want to make sure stay together, that remain in one district, but also keeping in mind that we are still looking at spreading that population evenly throughout the districts. So those are the two balancing things that we are really focused on during this redistricting period. And so this is, again, a brief timeline of what our redistricting process is going to look like. We've received the data from the federal government. And so now we're in our second public hearing today, so that we can start looking at what those communities of interest look like and what we need to, if anything, change about our districts as they are now in Lake County.
And I'll jump right in here and say, this is really the opportunity. We start drawing the maps when we're online. Sometimes the information is, when we get it at the last hearing is too late. So again, we encourage folks to really look at this next week or two, the hearing, and then next week or two as the real opportunities. Of course, we'll accept information at any point during this process, but to have real input in the actual drawing of the lines, as the last slide showed, is coming up right now. That's going to be an October activity once the data is released and start doing that. So we encourage folks to participate at this point. Again, I'll just jump in and finish it off. We had our first hearing. We are now doing our second hearing. And again, there's information on how to do our next hearings. Our next one will be November 2nd, and that's where we'll have the draft maps. So as I said, getting information in October is vitally important. And then the final map is going to be adopted on November 30th, which gives folks enough time to get those redone before our next round of elections. Again, going back to the website, we are looking forward to receiving comments on redistricting at lakecountyca.gov. It's a great way to do it. I understand that having this presentation and then hearing the concept of community of interest is a lot broader than I think the name makes it sound. I mean, typically you think of these big cities or counties or special districts as only community interest. What we hope we convey today is it's a lot broader than that. So again, we don't expect everyone to have their answers today about what they see as a community of interest. But we would love you to email us so that we can consider that. Again, we've got a website. The county's created a website, which is displayed on the screen, and that has a lot of information. This hearing will be on there, as well as all the information and draft maps will be on there as well. So if you want to follow along, that's a great way to do it. And again, we also have Facebook, TV, and YouTube, and all the other great modern technology to get this out there. Again, all the contact information that we can provide for you to be involved. So what we'd like to do now, since that's the completion of our presentation, take the technical board and open it up to see if there's any public comment or anyone in the waiting room who'd like to contribute their thoughts on it. Once the public comment's done, we would like to bring it back, and if the board has any thoughts or has any communities of interest they're interested in us looking at, give them an opportunity as well to do that. So I turn it over to the board.
All right, thank you very much. I want to check in again with Mr. Rothstein if there's any further comments before we go ahead and bring it back to the board and open it up for the public.
I don't have any further comments at this time, but definitely appreciate the opportunity, Chairman Sabatier. So we'll look forward to hearing from the public and hearing the direction of your board.
Okay. And even though it's been already said, I just kind of want to reiterate, the idea is not to draw what we want the districts to look like. The idea is to provide communities of interest so that we make sure that as we redistrict, we try to keep as many of those communities of interest within one district rather than splitting them off into two. So it's make sure when you're looking at drawing lines on the map that you are looking a bit more microscopically rather than looking at the aggregate of the entire county and trying to split that into 5. That part will be done as maps are drawn out based on what we're going to receive for those smaller communities of interest. We do have a hand up right now. We have Betsy Kahn, and so unless there's something from the board, just want to make sure that before we open it. We could do that after the public provides some of that. Okay. And so let's go ahead and start with Betsy Kahn. And if we can get her unmuted.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to the folks from the redistricting group. I have a suggestion. The general plan from 2008 defined areas called community development boundaries, and I believe there were 7 or 8 of those. and these are in the unincorporated areas of the county outside these cities. Then in the meantime, many of those communities have created municipal advisory councils, and the municipal advisory council is covers a specific area. Not all of the municipal advisory councils have clear maps that show their jurisdictional coverage. So there's some vagueness involved here. For example, the Municipal Advisory Council for Upper Lake and Nice also includes Lake Pillsbury, which is certainly within the geographical, reach of that council, but we don't actually have an active council that they participate in. Now, the concern I have over those municipal advisory council areas is that they also are the focal point of the function of the National Disaster Recovery Framework from FEMA, which focuses on what they call community lifelines. So my long-term interest is in having each of those areas be equipped to respond in disasters and prepare for disasters in the cooperation with the Operational Area Council, the Office of Emergency Services, but using the authority and tools of the Municipal Advisory Council to establish priorities for protecting those resources that the FEMA considers to be critical community lifelines. So I'm just suggesting that we want to use the Municipal Advisory Council areas in the unincorporated territories to be sure that we're keeping those groups of people contiguous. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Are there any further public comments in the Zoom room? And let's go ahead and ask if we have any public comments for communities of interest in the boardroom. And seeing none and no hands popping up during the same time in the Zoom room, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board, where I believe Supervisor Pyska has some comments.
Yeah, it's a little difficult to have this conversation without understanding how much the districts have changed over time. And I know that my district has lost a lot of people from the Valley Fire. So I'm what?
You're done.
I'm done. So I'm really interested to see that data to understand the next steps of the conversation. But as Betsy pointed out, and this is something that I wanted to bring up, the municipal advisory councils have been really active in the last 10 years. And the Cobb Area Council is a very large, covers a very large area. And you can look up those boundaries at cobbareacouncil.org. That is an area that has been cut down the middle and divided up so many times every time redistricting happens. And that community has really grown together, and that town hall is very, very strong. So it would be difficult for that community to be divided within that boundary. The other one that's difficult is the town of Kelseyville. The town proper is in District 5, but if you cross the street from the post office, you're in District 4, which is Lakeport, so that is also a problematic boundary. I know it would probably be best to have all of the Rivieras together, but they are really large population areas too, so maybe that is less important than the town of Kelseyville, which really truly is a community of interest. And the ag industry there too, but you do have to draw that line somewhere across Big Valley, but maybe giving a little bit more of the town of Kelseyville to District 5 would be beneficial.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments from other supervisors? Supervisor Scott.
Yeah, just that I definitely agree we need to be looking at those lines in the Kelseyville area, because I know there's some conflicting when you're looking at, the town proper of Kelseyville and how it opens up and it goes into District 4. So, but I also kind of think that we need to be putting the Rivieras back together, because originally they were, I believe, 10 years ago, and then they were sliced apart, and part of it was put into District 4. And if I remember correctly, they were not really happy about that. They wanted to be kept together because they have a lot of the same issues fire-wise and that. But I know we can't give you everything. It all can't be in District 5, so there has to be a line somewhere, but if we could look at those two areas.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Supervisor Crandall.
Thank you. Yes, and Betsy's absolutely right about the Lake Pillsbury group. We don't really have a lot. I've been trying to get a representative that wants to come to the town hall meetings. They more or less kind of talk to us in the aspect of like the Lake Pillsbury Alliance when it comes to that situation with the Scott Dam. And so in working with them, they haven't sent a representative out, but yet clearly it's in our district and it's in the West Region Town Hall mapping of that. And the smallest that we have in that map, if you will, is the Lucerne area. And so that just goes into the community growth boundaries of Lucerne, and then everything else kind of like spans out. I know that there's some concern over in Spring Valley about some of the progress that we've made with the roadmap task force and things like that. They're concerned that if anything takes place, that they will lose progress, but I don't think it will, because I know that they're still part of Clear Lake Oaks, and that was the whole purpose of that. So I just wanted to highlight that in case any of them are listening or talking, and in case anyone else has some more insight. So,
thank you, Supervisor Crandall. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, I just think, I appreciated the conversation from Supervisor Pyska. Kind of, I guess area of focus anyway for District 1 is since coming on the board, I know I wasn't here the last time they did redistricting and understanding it, but kind of the area of interest, I guess, would say in my district would be kind of the way Cache Creek kind of splits between, I got Anderson Springs, Hidden Valley, Middletown, Jerusalem Valley, but then I go to the community of Lower Lake and then into the city of Clear Lake, where it goes to the north side of Cache Creek there. And so I only bring it up that there's kind of a natural line there with the creek, whether, District 1 into Supervisor Sabate's spot, it would just be adding Supervisor Sabate into the whole Clear Lake area on the north side of the lake, and then, the district for District 1 on the south side of Cache Creek there, the Lower Lake, all the way down. So that's the only really one that I think have like a community of interest, keeping everything together would be that thought there. So that's all I have.
Thank you for that. And I think that the city of Clear Lake is probably one of the most difficult ones because it represents 15,000 population. I don't know what the updated number will look like. I don't have that data in front of me. And I know when you divide 64,500 people divided by 5, you get a lot less than 15,000. So there has to be a split somewhere. And I know in the conversation of the communities of interest, it makes sense as to how it is split, with District 1 taking on that portion. The village area and Highlands Harbor is definitely its own unique area. Then further on down, there's a number of trailer parks that are all a part of that area as well, going into Redbud Park. When looking at it from the perspective of communities of interest, it definitely has a collection of similarities rather than just adding population in order to try to get it as even as possible. My guess is that we're going to see an increase of population in the city of Clear Lake. And I know that one of the things I'm thinking about is the northern section of Clear Lake, where we had the sulfur fire. And I think that that northern section definitely has a lot of similarities with the rest of Windflower Point, where there's a lot of seasonal housing, vacation housing. For example, when we had the sulfur fire, a large number of people who lost homes were not residents of the city of Clear Lake, but people who had secondary homes. So there's definitely that level of similarity up there as well. I think it's probably going to be the most difficult one, just because obviously the city of Clear Lake would seem to have a common community of interest, but because of the population number, it's going to have to be split up, either increasing District 1 or increasing District 3. I believe that that's the way it's going to happen, one way or the other. So it'll be an interesting situation. I don't know what other comment to make as far as other districts. I don't disagree with any of the comments that I've heard from other supervisors. I know that it is very strange, and obviously it's because it's not, nothing could be made perfect, because again, we have to split the population, but it is strange that Big Valley is definitely a common community of interest. That is definitely split, but at the same time, I don't think everything is ever going to be perfect. We're going to have to split up some communities of interest, as it's not going to be possible to not do so. And I think I go back to one of the first things I stated, which is the smaller the community of interest is, the easier it will be to be able to isolate it within one district, rather than having such a large acre area, because then it becomes that much more difficult. I do want to reopen public comment. I want to make sure we're here for public comment, and so I saw a hand pop up, and if all Board of Supervisors don't mind, I am going to reopen public comment to make sure we get it. So please come on up to the microphone and give us your name and state your comment.
Hi, my name is Is it on?
Sam, I'm sure he'll turn it on. You can start speaking.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lonnie Urquiza. I live in the Lucerne area, and I do have a concern with District 3. 10 years ago, they took over the Windflower Point and part of, I think they call it, I don't remember, Clear Lake, that part of it where it all burned. And so I just see that. I know some people that live there, and they weren't very happy when they were shifted from your district, District 2 to District 3. So I just wanted to keep in mind, I hope that those residents contact the redistricting and participate in this and let their concerns be known. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, our Registrar of Voters, Maria Valadez, has joined us in the Zoom room by telephone. May I allow her to speak?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and close public comment, since I don't see any further hands up or both in the boardroom or the Zoom room, and let's go ahead and go to our Registrar of Voters, Maria Valadez.
And she is in the room.
Good morning.
Now you can see her name. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Maria Valadez, Registrar of Voters. And I just want to reiterate what Supervisor Sabatier mentioned about the population. 10 years ago, when redrawing the lines, that was one of the hardest things, was to try to keep certain areas in their same supervisorial district, because at some point, one of the districts has to gain and the other has to lose. So I know that they try to, keep as many of those community interests as possible without having to redraw all of the connecting shifting everything around, so they try to keep it where I think it was District 3 and 4 were the ones that had to gain and lose mostly. So that's where most of the area was shifted. And then, yes, that Windflower Point area was shifted to District 3, but because, again, the population in the city of Clear Lake is so high that, it has to be one person, one vote. So, just keep that in mind, that when these lines are drawn, that's kind of what one of the biggest focuses is that we have to keep.
Thank you for your comment.
And if I could add, Mr. Rothstein did provide some numbers for the population for the districts, and that might be helpful in this discussion as well, if you'd like to hear those.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And and obviously, just to clarify, this is for the current districts as they are. This is the changes that we would see. So anything we change would move around those numbers.
Yes. And so Mr. Rothstein did roughly estimate that we are looking at needing 13,633 people in each district. So with that number in mind, these are the current district population counts in the present boundaries.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that number that we all need to figure out how to match?
Yes. 13,633.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that number in mind, District 1 is currently at 13,294. District 2 is at 14,311. District 3 is at 13,905. District 4 is at 13,821. And District 5 is at 12,708.
If I could jump in as well, the goal is to get it as even as possible, but remember the law requires us to get within 10%. I believe a good goal is to get more like a 3 or 4% of each other. But again, we have a little ability to move things around, but those are the current estimated numbers we have today.
No, that's very appreciated to get an understanding of any increases or decreases that we might be seeing. Looks like the biggest one that needs to have the increase would be District 5 at this moment in time. And I would suspect that District 5 supervisor is not too surprised about that. So I do want to just make a couple more statements just to provide what I believe are absolutely communities of interest. I think that the entire area of the city of Clear Lake, the Chapman Track or the avenues, is definitely one. I mean, it's such a large area, but there is really, it has a lot of commonalities throughout. I really feel that the areas that are north of Burns Valley Road and north of Old Highway 53 in that region of the northern section of the city, where we see a lot more type of ranchette type of housing and acre and a quarter size properties. It's a lot more rural in that general area. So I would love to see that. Make sure that we keep that together. The area known as the Park, which is north of Country Club and north of Arrowhead, I think that has a lot of commonalities. And obviously the center of town itself has a lot of commonalities as well. So just kind of wanted to highlight those areas since in my mind those are unique sectors of the city itself, just to try to make sure we keep those together.
Thank you.
So I see no further hands up in the public and no further hands up in the Zoom room. Just wondering if there's any further comments. Supervisor Scott?
Just have a question. Have we received much community input for areas of interest, communities of interest?
So at this time, we have not. Again, that's why we're encouraging individuals to use the email. We have not received any email input, but we're hoping that after this hearing and understanding the parameters of what a community of interest looks like, we will start receiving more input.
Okay. Any further comments from supervisors? And seeing none, I'm just going to reiterate that. Please follow the links that were provided today. Submit your communities of interest. And that way we can do the best that we can to ensure that the districts are made whole with those communities of interest, or with as many of those communities of interest. Not submitting anything will not provide us that much guidance, and we will go with the information that is already available to us. Obviously, we, as stated, we have an average amount of population that we need to look at, give or take 10%. But we're going to continue to work and do our best to remap it appropriately. But with your help, we can do it even better. So hopefully, we will be continuing to advertise those links so that people can get that information into us. I'm certain that the administrative staff will be working on putting that out on social media, maybe some press releases. And then we could do that on our own as well when we meet with our town halls, or we meet with our groups that we regularly meet with in our districts. And I do have a hand up that popped up again, and I apologize for this, but because this is absolutely important for us to have the public comment, I want to make sure we catch those. And let's go back to opening up public comment, and Betsy Kahn.
Thank you so much, Chair and everybody. I have one question for the process itself. I know that the instructions include the option of drawing maps that we can submit, so I could take a map and draw a line around it. But I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to obtain a map online and then draw a line on it. So can you give us some guidance on how the public can do that?
Absolutely happy. Oh, Matthew jumped in as well. I'll let you take that.
Okay, yes, so there is a mapping tool available. If you navigate to the county's primary webpage, lakecountyca.gov, in the featured section, just below the fold, there is a button that leads you right to our redistricting page. So that's probably the easiest way to access it. And there is a mapping tool available on that redistricting page. And there is a printable PDF there as well. And if you're not able to access it for any reason, please don't hesitate to let us know and reach out via that redistricting@lakecountyca.gov email address. Again, that's redistricting@lakecountyca.gov. Thank you very much, Betsy.
Thank you so much.
Good question, and I'm glad we had a great answer. That makes it easier for everyone to be able to submit the information rather than try and provide some coordinates and street crossings, and that just makes it more difficult. So appreciate the question and answer. I see no further hands up, both in the boardroom and in the Zoom room, and I believe that all supervisors are done with their comments at this moment in time. Really appreciate the presentation. This is an important process that happens once every 10 years, so we will continue. We have more meetings to come, 2 more. In fact, and next one will be where we show off the mapping that has been created based on the submissions that we have received. And so with that, let's go ahead and close that item. And by closing that item, we also are going to adjourn this meeting. And so thank you everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful Saturday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.